have a slightly different structure for the next presentation because we have two speakers, so I'll quickly do the biog so I don't cut into their time. Laura Reid is our first speaker. She's 10 years professional experience in business and holds a Master's in International Relations and a dual degree in European Business and French from GCU and Reims Management School in France. Laura has held numerous volunteer and community roles and was elected and served in the National Executive of Fianna Fáil. She was appointed the Advocacy, Engagement and Participation Officer of the Alzheimer's Society of Ireland in November 2018 and has a particular responsibility for the management and development of the Dementia Carers Campaign Network. Laura was also a primary care for her mother who lived with dementia. And our second speaker is Aisling Harmon. She's a family carer for over 20 years and cared for both her parents with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and cares for her mother now. She works part-time as an osteopath, self-employed, and has had to scale back due to her care demands, so knows too well all the challenges that caring and working and everything else holds. She campaigns as part of the Dementia Carers Campaign Network and with Care Alliance Ireland, and it has been as panellist and speaker at a number of different events and institutions such as NUI Galway and the Royal College of Surgeons, and she loves cats.
Firstly, thank you to Liam, Zoe and Kevin for today and for all the wonderful speakers so far this morning. Sincere thanks for allowing us to speak today. So we really aren't a research group, we are an advocacy group. But to have the carer voice here today, we're really delighted that you invited us along. So today I want to talk to you about care resilience and in particular what care resilience looks like for a carer whose loved one is transitioning into long-term care. So from a conversation with our members in the Dementia Carers Campaign Network, they have asked for an amendment to happen for the National Care Strategy, so I'm just going to talk you through that today. So firstly, what is the Dementia Carers Campaign Network? So it's an advocacy group of family carers. So we have in and around now around 50 members around the country, and primarily we have a group based in Dublin and another one based in Limerick. So our members engage in many different ways, from research to advocacy, lobbying our elected representatives, speaking at numerous conferences, engaging with healthcare professionals, speaking with media engagements and that, really just to be able to get the carer voice heard. So today I'm going to speak about a little bit of research that we have done amongst our network, what we would like to see happen with the National Care Strategy, and then Aisling is going to speak about her lived experience of caring. So what is care resilience? For those, I'm sure everyone in the room knows, but it's the bounce back ability of a carer to continue caring following hardship. And the most significant factors for that is being informed and being supported. And the research that we had done was to see how informed and supported does carer feel as the person engages with either long-term residential care or if their loved one is engaging with hospice care. The way in which we did our research was that our carers started the conversation themselves, so decided on the topic. Our carers set the questions, and Aisling will speak to that. Our carers answered the survey, and therefore you will really get today a sense of what the carer voice needs to say about this topic. How informed and supported does carer feel as the person engages with either long-term residential care or if their loved one is engaging with hospice care. The way in which we did our research was that our carers started the conversation themselves, so decided on the topic. Our carers set the questions, and Aisling will speak to that. Our carers answered the survey, and therefore you will really get today a sense of what the carer voice needs to say about this topic. So the results, our carers felt more informed and supported when their person being cared for engaged with hospice care rather than long-term residential care. So I just today have a few quotes from our carers. So in terms of long-term residential care, Susan explained that whilst there is some appreciation that a carer needs help and a loved one is living with them, we are not taken into account when our loved one is in full-time care. Whereas for hospice care, Martin says that his hospice nurse was an angel. She explained all that was going to happen. She removed our panic, and we got all 10 grandchildren to say goodbye to Nana, And then we spent the next day with Bridget, letting her know all was okay and she was free to go. For long-term care, Bernadette says she wishes there had been somebody to discuss the huge transition into residential care, the adjustments, the sadness, the feelings and the struggles that the transition brought her personally. For hospice care, Annie says that hospice care in the community was wonderful. They were always available day or night, and they worked with me, accepting that I was an expert in my husband's care. So what does that mean on carer resilience? Well, carers don't feel properly informed and supported as their person being cared for engages with long-term care, and they feel more informed and supported as their person engages with hospice care. So with regard to the National Carer Strategy, it should really be looked at in terms of how we can improve carer resilience when a loved one engages with long-term residential care. So that brings us on to the strategy. So the aim of the strategy is to support people to live in dignity and independence in their own homes and communities for as long as possible. That is the key aim of the strategy. The strategy focuses on carers in the community who can be caring for family members, for neighbours or friends in some cases. And they do go into that, that definition doesn't cover everyone, that there might be people providing a limited number of hours for a short period, and that might need some support information on that. But for us, where is the carer provided for when their loved one engages with long-term residential care? The role of a carer doesn't just finish when their person goes into long-term residential care. So that aim is really for thinking about the person being cared for and not the entire carer journey. So we recommend an amendment to the definition of carer. So currently it focuses on carers in the community. The strategy, when it was made, identified that almost 81,000 provide up to 2 hours of care per day. And we would like to say that a carer supporting their loved one in long-term residential care may provide a similar amount of care, and why aren't they being considered? So what the DCCN, the Carers Campaign Network, proposes is an amendment to the strategy to specifically include an offer of provision for those family carers as well. Their caring role doesn't end when their loved one no longer lives at home. What we propose is that research is undertaken to create proper policy provision for carers whose person is in long-term residential care, so that can promote the recognition and inclusion as partners with care teams in long-term residential care, that learnings can be made from the engagement of carers in the hospice model, as seen from our earlier research, and that these specific policies and measures may positively impact carer resilience. So the strategy is based on these 4 national goals for carers, and we think an amendment was to take place with the definition, and these carers are broader into that definition, that if carers were recognise the value and contribution of carers to manage their physical, mental and emotional health and well-being, support carers to care with confidence, and empower carers to participate as fully as possible in economic and social life, that all of this would have a huge part to play in terms of carer resilience for carers for their entire journey of caring, and as we say, not just when their loved one is at home. Therefore, carers would be recognised as key care partners, supported to maintain their own health and well-being, to continue to care with confidence, to be empowered to participate as fully as possible, and as we say, to improve the carer resilience. Today, why we're here is to get the carer voice across, and I'm very conscious that I want most of this time to be given to a carer who is currently caring, so if I could invite Aisling to come up and to speak.
Thank you, Laura. Okay. I'm very conscious that I'm here today speaking to you as a carer, but also a lot of the information that I wanted to relay to you and to share with you, a lot of that's been covered in many of the other presentations, which is hugely heartening as a carer. So for this agenda today, to Liam and the team at Care Alliance, you've hit the button spot on with your speakers. Thank you very much. That's very reassuring. And I'm conscious that there may be people in the room who, whilst they're not carers explicitly on their agenda, that they are actually doing care work at home for loved ones. And some of what I come up with might be a little distressing, and it's not intended that way. The information we're hearing today relates to all carers, but I'm here to speak to you as a dementia carer, which is a very specific area of care that has other specific peculiarities, characteristics, demands opportunities, wonderful memories ultimately, but at the time of care, particularly in the advanced stages, it's very debilitating, it can be very overwhelming. So I hope I don't offend with some of my words, but I wish to give it to you as it is, as a lived experience. I cared for my father for over 15 years, who had Alzheimer's dementia. I cared from abroad and then returned home to help to look out for him, and assisted my mother, who then had leukemia and now has Parkinson's disease and dementia, and I care for her at home. So it's a long journey of caring that's gone on for over 20 years from abroad, being back here in Ireland, and now having to reduce my working hours as that care demand increases and we don't have options. We've had our 3 years of fair deal in a nursing home, which we're still recovering from financially, and in terms of prospects, it frames the whole opportunity of care for my mum. Kevin, I'm going to ask if I can maybe do it from here. I'm just going to go to the next slide, because will it come up, the resilience one here? Here we are. Is it there? Yes, it is. Okay. I had the fortune through Care Alliance to take part in a wonderful resilience project hosted with Attractive Lafferty and her team in UCD, and it was towards resilience of families caring for someone with dementia, and I was a carer representative on that. And my experiences of resilience are very specific now, again I say, to dementia, and I categorise them across 4 domains. You have a resilience that's financial, emotional, intellectual and physical. And you really hone these skills down. I'll go into a little detail on them now. The problem is they can be your undoing. You can be your own best resilient partner and do too good a job, and then find that you fall at a later stage in your carer journey. And that's something that I'm only experiencing now, and really realising how it's your best friend and can also hold you back from receiving other supports and services, or maybe they're not identified as you don't self-identify that for their need, or your supportive partners don't identify that actually you could do it some of this now. If I look at the intellectual, you live with the taboo from the time that somebody is identified as having a dementia, particularly with early onset, and whilst outlooks and attitudes are changing, which is just so welcome, it's a really tough call. There's a lot of isolation particular to the dementia carer. So many people just say, gosh, we've heard the news about your dad, that's awfully sad, and it's almost a little wall or a barrier that's being put between you and them. You have many people in the early stages who are so willing to help, to be available, to be a companion, but as the going gets tougher, they withdraw from that. So you develop a circle of what I call the Onyas, always willing but never available. And there are people who have the greatest of intentions. They can be your immediate family, a sibling, a spouse, an aunt, uncle, a child, but they can also be your immediate personal network of friends, both for the person you're caring for and your own network. And you lose some of that support group. Not everybody is suited to go in and be a carer of someone with advanced dementia, for example, whether they're at home or whether they're transferred into nursing home. You have a lot of legal discontent in families that comes up at a time, and you have a long journey. This isn't something that's just decided overnight. There are lots of battles, lots of very tough conversations. Somebody who is identified as a carer, maybe because they're available rather than being the best fit. You're in uncharted territory. You become a very good military practitioner. You learn to live with anticipation and to plan your life throughout that and to support your loved one. But you also have demands and burdens that you wouldn't have expected. So my mum in her early days said, God, your dad always looked after that. I'm finding that really hard. And you have to become, in practical terms, in the financial sense, you become your own accountant, you become your own solicitor, you become a power of attorney, and then you face the red tape of the banks sector, etc., who don't recognise that even something given to you legally through a court action that defines you as the legal power of attorney and registered it, you still get no access to people's details, you still can't be spoken to on the phone because you're not the account holder. So there's a whole world of red tape resilience that you learn to survive and to get through. Financially, you're in the rainy day, and it can start very early on in the journey, and you've provided, you put by for your life, you maybe encounter the fair deal, or some would say not so fair a deal, and you're punished for having been prudent, putting aside for your future and trying to rely on the asset that you own to help fund your future care and not burden the state further. You've also maybe paid into a health policy for many years that doesn't do a whit for dementia care. It'll get you a private psychiatrist consultation, but it doesn't provide ongoing care in the community, which is where you need it. So it'll get you a private physio, but it won't get you access to the public services or a social worker, which is absolutely what you need. So Emma, not all social work interventions are negative. We've had some good experience too. If you're self-employed as a carer, God help you in Ireland. That's all I can say. I've experienced the gamut of it between means testing, being seen as a cohabitant in a house where you're helping a parent. You don't get sick leave, you don't get sick pay, you don't get holiday pay, etc. And you may not qualify at all. So you're actually forced out of the workplace. And it was different for spousal carers who maybe had finances in place. But when you're looking at the average 49-year-old who maybe is single and doesn't have a dependent family, equally nobody to support them, they're coming out of the workplace, they're not paying into the exchequer for their future care needs, and they're not earning pension credits depending on their financial acceptability for means testing, etc. There's a disconnect in the community. Lots of people have been talking about this. So as a carer, you have a defined public health nurse, maybe a psychiatric nurse as well. They rotate every 6 months. You've no continuity of care. So the person who needs to know your story, build your outcomes, as Emma so eloquently outlined it, it's a long journey. And that's where your support comes from. Somebody who knows you, knows your family, like your own GP relationship. But the current delivery of these supports doesn't take that into account. And everything is fractured to minute little bursts of episodes, etc. And that's not what policy wanted this to be. It wanted it to be all-embracing. Physically, you're broken. You suffer with mental health issues very often, but you are physically quite broken and you are sleep deprived. It's a great torture, believe me. And so you often approach some of the biggest decisions on behalf of your loved one when you're not at a peak performance yourself. And you look back on that, and that can be quite hard to hold. So you live with guilt, feeling you've not delivered the best for this person. So I would just say you've grieved for a person for a long time without having had the funeral. That's an enormous element of caring for someone with dementia. And so when you look at the transfer into hospice or into residential care, there are very different concepts and tenets that are in place. So you have somebody going in, such as the emergency case you mentioned, Rosemary, or Emma mentioned about a healthcare professional whose partner had a terminal diagnosis. You're in the palliative environment, everybody's on board, everybody's meeting your needs, everybody's supporting you, and everybody can engage with you more as an equal partner than your long-term journey of 10 plus years as a carer, which isn't really catered for in that policy. When you go to residential care and you hand your loved one over, you're suddenly lost. Your role is gone. What do you do? What's your daily routine going to be now? And you don't just reconnect back overnight and go back into the workplace or up your hours again. You're physically exhausted. You're probably quite traumatized. You're bereaved again because your loved one hasn't left this world. They're still alive, but they're in somebody else's hands now. And very often there's that sense of your own deficit of what you couldn't provide for them. That can be quite traumatic for a dementia carer handing over their loved one into that environment. The physical arrangements, as in, is there a place, is there not? Will we go into stand-down care in hospital, or do we go straight from home? That waiting game is rather torturous, and it's very inhumane for both the carer and for the loved one. And so you finally get that across the line, and you get a bed, and you say, hallelujah, this is going to be the right thing. And you're asked to stay away for 3 or 4 weeks, so that you don't interfere with the settlement process, which again, as a carer, is very difficult. That's when you need the SWAT team coming in and giving you the support that you've so bloody well worked for that long, long period of time. It's not that people don't care, it's just that the outcome, that the aim, isn't necessarily being identified at strategy or at policy level, and so it's not being delivered to the carer in the field, as it were. You feel quite undermined that you no longer belong. It's easy to get back into the workplace as you might believe it is. And I've been able to maintain workplace contacts, and through my advocacy work I have a network. But to literally get up and go and face a 9-to-5 workplace environment again, where you've been working on a different circadian clock, it just doesn't happen that easily. And that whole transfer back in, feeling that you're unskilled, that you have nothing to offer, that you have been redundant for that period of time from your workplace, there's an enormous transition. So we looked after the crisis about bringing people through job bridge, etc., to get them into work after the financial crisis, and there were massive redundancies. What do we do for the carer? Having not paid them, the care workers who come in for my home care package, which is 17 hours a week, earn on average £11.50 an hour. They get paid €195, but that's guaranteed to them. I haven't qualified for carers benefits on allowance because of means testing, and I know things are changing, but with the thresholds that are there, I have never qualified and fallen into that loop. But nobody has honoured me or rewarded me, which I don't expect personally, by the way, but the principle is that the carer is funding so much of care in the community, it's not being recognised later on when they need it, either with the tax credit or with the pension credit when they return into the quote-unquote usual workforce. But it's an incredibly honouring and fulfilling and humbling role to be a carer, and there are many who will still do that rather than feel that it's an onus forced upon them, and that must also be recognised. We're trying to work into a system that's really, really broken, so you can build the best financial models, so you can build the best care packages, but you must have embedded rights in law as a carer and as the caree, as the client receiving that care, and you must have strategies focused on both, and then they must be delivered ground up, not top down. So you must be connected and integrated into your community for that to happen, and that's a challenge in a very broken health delivery system. So on the one hand, I think to be part of health and social care, as Liam alluded to in his presentation, offers a threat but also an opportunity, because then you get onto a different agenda again that maybe is always going to be in the news, but you can risk getting lost in that period of time. So it's a bit of a whirlwind through the experience. I hope I haven't distressed people with some of the commentary, but that is my lived experience as specifically a carer for someone with dementia.
So I think what a way to end our morning session, hugely powerful, and I think Aisling for Taoiseach we'd have a great society. There was just so many things out of what you spoke of there that resonated, I'm sure, with so many people, and the language that you used was so powerful, from your Anyas which, to the SWAT team, to the honouring of both the carer and the caree. I think you brought so many true and honest points into the room today, and really the lived experience. So thank you so much for sharing. So just before we go to lunch, again, last round of questions or comments or observations on our lady here.
Thank you so much for that. It was absolutely different places, whether it's, and I think you brought up so many points, which I'm just kind of nodding at and nodding at. I can't believe you're two nurses. You're from different, that's always amazing. But anyway, I think that recognition of caring across spaces, across institutions, from home to institution to different places, whether it's a move to a long term or a short term, that's really important. Whether it's a hospital, where there's assumptions made about people with Alzheimer's, which are a kind of capacity deficit, assuming that people can do less than they actually can do because it's convenient, or whether it's a complete non-recognition of that relationship, because it's all about relationships. And I think that's really important that we emphasise that, and thank you so much for both of you for bringing that up. I think it's really important.
Thank you. So the comment there was really about the importance of recognition of caring across spaces, from the home to institutions like the hospitals and hospices, and that it's really all about the relationships that are there. So I don't know if you have any comments or
it's just this conversation has come up within the network over the last probably year and a half maybe, and it's just people feel that, you know, if they're perhaps providing full-time care at home for their loved one, and perhaps they're housebound for quite a while, and you know their circle gets very, very small, and perhaps they have professional carers coming in, and that is a sense of kind of care for the carer as well. And then all of a sudden their loved one is gone, their routine is gone, and when their loved one transitions, if they've held their care for so long, and all of a sudden they're handing it over to someone, you know, and they're very much still thinking about how that person is feeling, but who is thinking about how the carer is feeling? We've had so many carers saying that it is the most distressing part of their entire journey. One lady had her mother in long-term care for 10 years, and she says not once in that 10 years, and she'd been housebound for 10 years previous, her mother just did not want to leave the house. So, and she visited her mother every day in long-term care for 10 years, and not once did anyone ask if she was okay. No one had ever suggested counselling. So, you know, it's just, we can't just think that you know, and it's obviously it's wonderful to keep the person that's been cared for in the home for as long as possible, but that's not where the carer journey ends, and we can't have the national carer, the strategy end there. It has to be for the entire span of caring, and that's being an advocate for your person if they're long-term care and providing care. You go in, you absolutely provide care for the person. From personal experience, I know that myself. So, you know, we need to think about the care, and the strategy needs to think about the care the whole way through.
The first thing you'll be asked as the carer when you go into the nursing home or into respite care or into palliative care is you write up the profile, this is me, and you write it up on behalf of the dementia patient because you know them better than anybody. You have been their expert carer, you have been their nurse, you've been their palliative carer, you've been their social worker, you've been their advocate for however long that journey is. You go in and you fill in the form and then it's like, thanks Emil, bye. Great, we'll do it now. And it's almost the implication that A, what you've done is no longer valid. It was fine whilst they were at home, but they're in here now, we'll do the rest that you were unable to provide. Actually, many people are suitable candidates to stay at home. My father wasn't, my mother absolutely is. With the correct resourcing in place in terms of contact hours and a hoist, we can accommodate her better at home. It was never an option for my father, but we're under immense pressure not to do that because it's too expensive. And so it's with the correct resourcing in place in terms of contact hours and a hoist. We can accommodate her better at home. It was never an option for my father, but we're under immense pressure not to do that because it's too expensive. And so it's nothing about the value of what the carer is doing to subsidise that delivery of care in the community. That's where I see there's a gap also in the research, if I may be so bold. The policy doesn't look beyond the transfer as it is for the carer, but also that person might be better off at home. So what are you doing for that carer then? Because once the dementia patient has become completely lost to you cognitively, where they can no longer verbalise and express and engage with you that way, it's a very lonely space and it requires a different level of support and management in the home, but it can be delivered as well there as it can be institutionally. So that's also the ongoing care of the carer will be very different at that stage as it would be in the early stage of the journey.
Just from our research, you know, the people that we had a conversation with said that if their loved one engaged with hospice care, because the whole family is considered with hospice care, their experience was as positive as it possibly could be. So, you know, a nursing home or long-term residential care is for a person to continue to live well, and the carer must continue to live well at that stage as well. So, you know, it has to be a whole family approach then, as well as with hospice care. If we can do it for hospice care, why aren't we doing it for long-term care?
Yeah, very valid question, and it really struck me in your piece as well. It's very stark, the profound difference in experience, and really there are more people in long-term care or going to be in long-term care than in hospice care. So there's really implications for that, and the importance of the research, and again advocating for changes in policy. So that really important point you brought out.
It's not just to live well, it's to be allowed to die well. And the carer has invested hugely on behalf of their loved one to achieve that. And that's missing sometimes.
Thank you. No, it's okay. This is a real life, it's real emotions, and it is emotional. Caring is emotional. And I think, you know, too often carers, as you said, we can be our own best resource, but also our own worst enemy, because we often don't let the emotions come in until it's too late.
But
so
that's quite specific. That's for all carers of someone with long-term illness and life-threatening illness, not just the natural passage of life. But it's not really catered for in policy. And if you can get into that at an earlier stage, you'll have a better journey for both the carer and maybe the patient receiving the care, wherever that may be. And you can have a better synergy between the professional care partners and the informal carers, because throughout the dementia person's life, the informal carer has usually done the majority of the care journey as well. So it's just about balancing up that support for them in strategy and in policy.
Could I just mention that Carolines Ireland were kind enough to allow some of our carers to come today, and I can see that there are a couple of carers in the audience, so I know we're having lunch, but it'd be a wonderful opportunity for, you know, engagement with carers, because like this is, you know, where you get the real life experience. You know, what the policy means in real life or what it would mean in real life is from people living it.
yeah, and I think that's, you know, a good point to end on. We're just coming up to lunch now, and I just want to thank all 4 speakers who have just really, we've had such a great morning, and really one of the themes, or a couple of the themes that came out for me while listening to everyone, and including Ronan this morning, was it's really about thinking differently about both carers themselves and the supports that they need. And it's really about how research can provide the evidence, for want of a better word, so overt information that can be used both by organisations and by communities and carer themselves. And I think, again, making the point, we're heading into an election year, and to lobby and push for change and for better for carers. At some stage in our lives, we will all either be a carer or be cared for, I think is the saying. So I want to again thank everybody for their contribution, both everyone from the floor and our speakers, and invite you all to eat, drink and be merry.
Rosemary, can I say just one thing? And I'm sorry, I'm really going over time, I'm being selfish now. It is never too early from a research perspective to engage with PPI and to get that voice heard and have it frame your research question and your longitudinal, as Rob so rightly said, to frame your sample and to frame your long-term longitudinal ability to come back and revisit that and gain those trends over time is vitally important. And carers always love to be spoken to. They love to be taken into your confidence, and they will happily contribute. And they feel quite disenchanted if they feel they've come in a little bit late into the game and to said, gosh, you know, you're putting all this work in, but that's not quite the right question. So just for what it's worth, as a carer and as a budding researcher, you can never bring somebody in too early in PPI. It's very appropriate for this world. Thank you.
Thank you.